knocked on the wrong door, and got locked in by a naked alien teen. The wrong airlock. The maintenance corridor of Horizon Gateway smelled like recycled air and old metal, and Marco Reeves was so tired he could barely see straight. 26 hours into a double shift, his eyes burned as he squinted at the flickering work pad strapped to his forearm. Bay 12 needed a routine pressure seal check before the morning freight run. Simple job. 15 minutes, tops. Then he could collapse into his bunk and sleep for a week. Except, his brain was operating on fumes and autopilot, and when his numb fingers punched the access code into the keypad outside Bay 22, he didn't notice the number was wrong until the emergency hatch was already cycling open with a hydraulic hiss. "Shit," Marco muttered, stepping back. The airlock wasn't supposed to be active. This section of the lower docking ring had been decommissioned for weeks while they waited on parts from Earth. He reached for the override panel, ready to reseal the hatch and report the malfunction, when he heard it. A small, sharp intake of breath. Movement in the shadows behind the stacked cargo pods. Marco froze. Someone was in there. His training kicked in through the exhaustion. Unauthorized personnel in a restricted bay was a security issue, maybe even a safety hazard if the environmental controls were unstable. He should call it in. He should back out and let station security handle it. Instead, he heard himself say, "Hello? You okay in there?" Silence. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from behind the nearest pod. Marco's breath caught. She was young, maybe 19, 20 at most, and she was completely, utterly naked. But that wasn't what made his heart slam against his ribs. Her skin was blue. Not painted blue, not tattooed or modded. Blue like the deep part of the ocean where sunlight barely reached, shimmering faintly in the cold emergency lighting of the airlock. Her body was slender and curved in all the ways that made Marco's face burn hot, and her long hair, dark as midnight water, clung to her shoulders and back in damp waves. She stared at him with eyes the color of tropical shallows, wide and terrified, and Marco realized two things at once. One, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Two, she was absolutely petrified. "Wait," Marco started, holding up both hands in what he hoped was a calming gesture. I'm not going to hurt you, The girl flinched backward, and her skin darkened to navy, almost black at the edges like a bruise spreading across her shoulders and ribs. "Please," she whispered, and her voice was soft and musical and cracking with fear. "Please, don't tell them you saw me." Marco's mind was racing. Blue skin, bioluminescent color shifts. That meant she was probably Thalassian, from one of the ocean moons in the outer colonies. But Thalassians didn't come to Neptune orbit. They stayed in deep-water habitats, away from the dry stations and the corporate shipping lanes. Unless she was running from something. "Who's looking for you?" Marco asked quietly. The girl's throat worked as she swallowed hard. "Everyone." Before Marco could respond, the hatch behind him slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the airlock like a gunshot. The control panel lit up red. A calm, automated voice filled the cramped space. "Biocontainment protocol engaged. Distressed xenobiological signature detected. Airlock will remain sealed for 10 standard hours, or until mutual calm state is achieved between all occupants. Please remain calm." Marco stared at the sealed hatch, then at the control panel, then at the terrified, naked girl whose skin was now flickering between deep blue and something closer to purple. "Oh," he said faintly. "Okay, this is happening." The girl made a small, broken sound, and Marco turned to find her sinking to the floor, arms wrapped around herself, shoulders shaking. And despite the absurdity of the situation, despite the fact that he was trapped in an airlock with a gorgeous alien refugee and his brain was short-circuiting from exhaustion and panic, Marco did the only thing he could think of. He stripped off his thermal work shirt, walked over slowly, and draped it over her shoulders. "Hey," he said gently, crouching down to her level but keeping a respectful distance. "It's okay. We're gonna figure this out." She looked up at him, those huge teal eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and whispered, "You don't understand. If they find me here, they'll take me back. And I can't go back." Marco's jaw tightened. He didn't know who they were yet, but the look on her face told him everything he needed to know. Whoever was hunting her, they'd already hurt her enough. "Then they won't find you," Marco said firmly. "I promise."
Locked in by protocol. The thermal shirt hung loose on her narrow shoulders, falling almost to her knees, and Marco tried very hard not to notice the way the fabric clung to her damp skin or the graceful lines of her collarbones peeking out from the neckline. Focus. He needed to focus. "Okay," he said, settling onto the cold metal floor a few feet away from her, close enough to talk but far enough to give her space. "Let's start simple. I'm Marco Reeves. Cargo tech, third shift, perpetually exhausted." The ghost of a smile flickered across her lips. "Kira," she said softly. "Kira Salvin." "Nice to meet you, Kira, even if the circumstances are—" He gestured vaguely at the sealed hatch and the blinking red warning lights. "Unconventional." She pulled the shirt tighter around herself, and Marco watched her skin shift from that panicked navy to something slightly lighter, like twilight water. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trap you here. Thalassian distress pheromones trigger biocontainment protocols. It's a protection law for vulnerable species." "Hey, not your fault." Marco leaned back against the cargo pod, trying to look relaxed, even though his heart was still hammering. "So technically, I trapped us." Kira's eyes met his, searching his face like she was trying to figure out if he was real. "You're not angry?" "Angry?" Marco shook his head. "Kira, you're clearly running from something bad enough that you're hiding naked in the decommissioned airlock in the middle of Neptune's space. Not angry. I'm worried about you." Something in her expression cracked, and she ducked her head quickly, but not before Marco saw the tears spill over. "Shit." "Hey, no, I didn't mean to." But Kira shook her head hard. "No one's ever—" Her voice broke. "No one's ever worried about me before. Not like that, not like I'm a person instead of property." The word hit Marco like a punch to the gut. Property. His hands curled into fists against his thighs. "Who did that to you?" Kira took a shaky breath, pulling her knees up to her chest beneath the oversized shirt. "The Syndicate. They bought my contract from my birth clan when I was 15, said I had rare genetic markers, perfect for their breeding program. They've been keeping me in an underwater facility on Thalassia, waiting until I was old enough to—" She trailed off, skin flickering dark again. Marco felt sick. He'd heard rumors about the outer colony syndicates, the way they treated certain species like livestock, but hearing it from someone who'd lived it was different. Worse. "So you ran?" "I stowed away on a freight hauler 3 weeks ago. I've been hiding in the lower decks ever since, moving between cargo bays, stealing food from shipments. But they tracked me here. I saw their ship dock yesterday, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they searched this section." "And Thalassians shed clothing when seeking sanctuary. It's a vulnerability display. You were trying to signal you needed help." Kira nodded, a faint blush of lighter blue spreading across her cheeks. "It's instinct. When we feel trapped or desperate, we can't help it. It's supposed to trigger protective responses in other species." "Well, Marco said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. It worked. I'm not letting anyone take you anywhere you don't want to go. Kira stared at him. You don't even know me. I know enough. Marco met his gaze without flinching. I know you're brave as hell for running. I know you deserve better than being treated like property. And I know that anyone who's hunting a terrified kid through a space station is someone I'm very happy to make life difficult for. I'm 19, Kira said, almost defensively. Not a kid. Okay, terrified 19-year-old, Marco amended with a small smile. Point stands. For the first time since the hatch had sealed, Kira smiled back, really smiled, and her skin brightened to something closer to periwinkle, soft and almost glowing in the dim emergency lights. The II said 10 hours, or until we achieve mutual calm state. I think it means we both have to feel safe, together. Marco nodded slowly. Then let's work on that. You hungry? Because I have the galaxy's saddest vending machine coffee in my thermos and maybe half a protein bar in my pocket. It's not much, but I haven't eaten in 2 days, Kira admitted quietly. Marco was already digging through his work vest, producing a slightly crushed protein bar and his battered metal thermos. Okay, well, this just became a feast. Fair warning, the coffee tastes like recycled boot leather, but it's warm. Kira accepted the protein bar with trembling fingers, and when she took the first bite, her eyes actually closed in relief. Marco watched her eat, watched the tension slowly drain from her shoulders, watched her skin shift from anxious purple-blue to something gentler, like morning sky. Thank you, she whispered. Anytime. And he meant it. They sat in comfortable silence while she ate, the hum of the station's life support systems a steady backdrop. When Kira finished, she carefully folded the wrapper and tucked it into the shirt pocket, like she was afraid of making a mess in his space. So, Marco said, eventually, you said you want to study xenobotany. Kira's head snapped up, eyes wide. How did you... Marco nodded toward her hands. You've got soil under your fingernails, and there's a crushed seed pod stuck to your hair. Educated guess. Kira reached up self-consciously, pulling out the small brown pod and staring at it like she had forgotten it was there. Her expression softened. I used to tend the gardens, back before the syndicate. My mother taught me about the luminous kelp forests, the pressure bloom flowers. I wanted to study how different species plants could cross-pollinate in hybrid environments. That's incredible, Marco said honestly. It was a stupid dream, she muttered. No, Marco said firmly. It's a beautiful dream. And when we get out of here, maybe we can figure out how to make it happen. Kira looked at him like he'd just offered her the universe. You really mean that? She said wonderingly. You're not just saying things. I don't say things I don't mean. The temperature in the airlock had dropped a few degrees, and Marco noticed Kira shivering despite the shirt. Without thinking, he shifted closer, still respecting her space, but near enough that she could feel his warmth. You're cold, he said. Kira hesitated, then slowly leaned into him, her shoulder pressing against his. The contact sent a jolt through Marco's whole body, but he kept his breathing steady, kept his movements careful. Her skin was cool against his arm, but soft, impossibly soft. Is this okay? She asked in the smallest voice. Yeah, Marco said, and carefully, slowly, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Kira melted against him with a sigh that sounded like relief and wonder and a dozen other things Marco couldn't name. Her skin warmed where they touched, shifting from cool periwinkle to something warmer, almost lavender. I've never felt safe before, she whispered against his chest. Not once in 4 years. Marco's other arm came up, holding her gently, and he rested his chin on top of her head. You're safe now, he promised. And as the hours stretched ahead of them, Kira's breathing slowly evened out, her skin cycling through softer and softer shades of blue until it settled into something that looked almost peaceful. Maybe Marco thought the AI's protocol wasn't such a bad thing after all. Stories in the Silence. 4 hours in, and Marco had learned more about Kira Solvin than he'd learned about anyone in years. She talked haltingly at first, in fits and starts, but as the airlock grew warmer with their shared body heat and the emergency lights dimmed to a softer glow, the words came easier. She told him about growing up in the kelp towers of Thalassia, about swimming through bioluminescent forests with her younger sister, about her mother's hands teaching her to coax stubborn plants into bloom. She told him about the night the syndicate came, how they'd separated her from her family, how she'd spent 4 years in a sterile white facility, learning to be obedient and quiet and small. And Marco, who'd never been much of a talker, found himself sharing too, about growing up on a mining colony on Ganymede, about his dad disappearing when he was 12, about working every shift he could get to send money back to his mom and kid brother, about how lonely it got, working night shifts on a station where everyone else was asleep. "So we're both running from something," Kira said softly. She was curled against his side now, her head on his shoulder, one hand resting lightly on his chest. The shirt had ridden up slightly, exposing the elegant curve of her hip, and Marco kept his eyes firmly on her face. "I guess we are," Marco agreed, "though I'm mostly just running on fumes at this point." Kira laughed, the sound like water over stones, and her skin brightened to pale aquamarine. "You're funny. I didn't expect that." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Maybe someone who'd be angry about being trapped, or scared of me because I'm alien, or..." She trailed off, fingers curling slightly against his shirt. "Or someone who'd look at me like the syndicate doctors did, like I was something to examine instead of someone to know." Marco's hand, which had been resting carefully on his shoulder, tightened slightly. "Anyone who looks at you like that is an idiot." "You look at me differently," Kira said, and there was wonder in her voice. "You look at me like I matter." "You do matter. Even though I'm..." She gestured vaguely at her blue skin, at the way it shifted colors with her emotions, at everything that marked her as different. "Even though I'm this?" "Kira," Marco said, and he shifted so he could look at her properly. His free hand came up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. She shivered at the contact, and her skin flushed a deeper shade of blue where his fingers had touched. "You're not this. You're brave and smart, and you care about plants, and you've survived things that would break most people. The fact that you're beautiful and blue is just bonus." Kira's eyes went very wide. "You think I'm beautiful?" Marco felt his face heat. Yeah, of course. I mean, look at you." "No one's ever..." Kira's voice cracked. "The syndicate called me an asset, a specimen, a genetic investment, but never beautiful. Never anything that made me feel like a real person." Something in Marco's chest twisted painfully. He cupped her face with one hand, thumb brushing over her cheekbone, and watched her skin bloom lavender pink beneath his touch. "You're the most real person I've ever met," he said quietly. Kira's breath hitched. Her hand slid up to his neck, fingers trembling against his skin. "Marco?" "Yeah?" "The AI said mutual calm state, that we both have to feel safe. Do you feel safe with me?" "Completely." "I feel safe with you too. For the first time in so long. And I know we just met. I know this is probably the adrenaline or the situation or something else that's not real, but It's real," Marco interrupted gently. "Whatever this is, it's real. I feel it too." Kira made a soft sound, something between a laugh and a sob, and then she was pressing closer, her forehead against his, her breath warm on his lips. "In Thalassian culture, when someone offers you sanctuary, you can seal the bond with a kiss, freely given, no obligation, just a choice." Marco's heart was thundering so loud he could hear it. "And if I want you to choose me?" "Then I would," Kira said simply. I would choose you every time. Even though I opened the wrong airlock? Especially because you opened the wrong airlock. Marco smiled, and carefully, giving her every chance to pull away, he closed the distance between them. The kiss was soft, tentative, sweet in a way that made Marco's whole chest ache. Kira's lips were cool and tasted lightly like the protein bar and something else, something that reminded him of ocean air and starlight. She made a small sound against his mouth, and her skin flared brilliant aquamarine everywhere they touched. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the airlock was filled with soft blue-green light radiating from her skin. And with a quiet click, the hatch unlocked. Biocontainment released. Mutual calm state achieved. Airlock is now accessible. Neither of them moved. It's open, Kira said unnecessarily. I noticed. We could leave. We could? Kira pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes bright and her skin glowing like a sunset on water. What if I don't want to leave yet? Marco's hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head. Then we don't leave. What if I don't want to leave at all? Kira whispered. What if I want to stay with you? Marco kissed her again, deeper this time, and felt her melt against him with a sound that was pure relief. Then stay, he murmured against her lips. Stay as long as you want. Kira's arms wrapped around his neck, and she kissed him back like he was air and she'd been drowning, like he was home and she'd been lost for years. Her skin cycled through a dozen shades, lavender to rose to pale pink to something that looked almost pearlescent, and Marco couldn't stop touching her, couldn't stop marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. Marco, she breathed between kisses. Yeah? I think I knocked on the wrong airlock and found exactly where I was supposed to be. Marco laughed, the sound surprising him, and held her closer. Funny, I was thinking the same thing. They stayed in that airlock for 3 more hours, wrapped around each other, trading kisses and stories and promises in the soft glow of her luminescent skin. And when they finally emerged, hand in hand, Kira wearing nothing but Marco's work shirt and a smile that could light up the whole station, Marco knew that his life had just changed completely. He'd opened the wrong door and found the only person in the galaxy who was meant to walk through it.
The corridor outside the airlock was empty, the night shift hum of the station creating a cocoon of privacy around them. Kira's fingers were laced so tightly with Marco's that he could feel her pulse, quick and nervous, against his palm. They could still be looking for me, she said quietly, her skin flickering anxiously between pale blue and dusky purple. The syndicate doesn't give up easily. Marco squeezed her hand. Then we're smart about this. My quarters are 3 levels up, in the tech crew housing block. It's not fancy, but it's private and the security codes rotate daily. They won't find you there. Kira looked up at him, those enormous teal eyes searching his face. You're really going to hide me? You could lose your job, or worse. Let me worry about that, Marco said firmly. He tugged the work shirt more securely around her shoulders, trying not to notice how the hem barely covered her thighs or how her long legs seemed to glow faintly in the dim corridor lighting. Right now, I'm worried about getting you somewhere safe and warm, and maybe finding you some actual clothes. A smile ghosted across Kira's lips. Thalassians don't really do clothes, not the way humans do. We wore kelp weave wraps sometimes, for decoration, but never because we needed to. Our skin regulates temperature on its own. Well, humans definitely do clothes, Marco said, feeling his face heat. And while I'm extremely aware that you look incredible exactly as you are, I don't want anyone else looking at you like that. Call me selfish. Kira's skin flushed the prettiest shade of pink he'd seen yet, spreading from her cheeks down her neck. You're jealous? Protective, Marco corrected. There's a difference. I like it, Kira admitted shyly. No one's ever been protective of me before. Not like this. They made their way through the silent corridors, Marco checking each intersection before they crossed. Kira moved like liquid beside him, graceful and silent, and Marco found himself wondering what she looked like swimming through those bioluminescent forests she'd described. His quarters were small, a single room with a narrow bed, a micro-kitchen, and a tiny bathroom, but they were clean and private. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, and Marco immediately went to the storage locker, pulling out spare clothes. "Here," he said, offering her a soft thermal shirt and a pair of sleep pants with a drawstring waist. "They'll be huge on you, but at least they're clean." Kira took them, holding the fabric like it was something precious. Then she looked up at him through her lashes. "Will you stay while I change? I don't want to be alone right now." Marco's throat dried. "Kira, please," she whispered. "I trust you. You're the only person I trust." So Marco sat on the edge of the bed, determinedly studying the ceiling panels while Kira slipped out of his work shirt. He heard the soft rustle of fabric, the quiet sounds of her dressing, and tried very hard not to imagine the body he'd been holding just minutes ago. "Okay," Kira said softly. "You can look." Marco looked. She was drowning in his clothes. The shirt hung off one shoulder, exposing the elegant line of her collarbone, and the pants were rolled up several times at the ankles. Her dark hair fell in waves around her face, and her skin had settled into a soft, warm periwinkle that made her look like a sunset over water. "You're staring," Kira said, but she was smiling. "Can't help it," Marco admitted. "You're beautiful." Kira crossed to him slowly, stopping between his knees. Her hands came up to rest on his shoulders, and Marco's hands automatically settled on his waist, thumbs brushing the bare skin where the shirt had ridden up. She shivered at the contact, skin warming beneath his touch. "Marco," she said quietly, "in Thalassian culture, when someone offers sanctuary and it's accepted, there's a ritual, a bonding." "What kind of bonding?" Marco asked, though his heart was already racing. "The kind where the person seeking sanctuary offers their first willing touch to the one who protects them, skin to skin, heart to heart." Kira's hand slid from his shoulders to his chest, and he could feel her trembling. "It's supposed to create a permanent bond, a connection that can't be broken." Marco's hands tightened on her waist. "Kira, you don't have to." "I want to," she interrupted fiercely. "I've never wanted anything more. The Syndicate wanted to choose for me, to decide who touched me, who had me, who owned me. But this is my choice. You're my choice, Marco." "You barely know me," Marco said, even though everything in him was screaming to pull her closer. "I know that you opened the wrong door and stayed anyway. I know that you gave me your shirt and your food and your protection without asking for anything in return. I know that you held me when I cried and kissed me like I was something precious." Kira's voice cracked. "I know that in 10 hours, you made me feel more human than 4 years in a Syndicate facility ever did." Marco stood slowly, bringing her with him until they were chest to chest. "If we do this," he said seriously, "I need you to understand something. This isn't just some ritual to me. If you choose me, I'm choosing you back. All the way, no matter what comes." Kira's eyes were shining. "Promise?" "Promise," Marco said, and kissed her. This kiss was different from the ones in the airlock, deeper, hungrier, full of everything they hadn't said yet. Kira's arms wound around his neck and she pressed against him, skin glowing brighter with each passing second. Marco's hand slid under the hem of her shirt, fingers splaying across the bare skin of her back, and Kira gasped into his mouth. Her skin was impossibly soft, warming rapidly beneath his touch, shifting through a dozen shades of blue and purple and pink. "Marco, please," she breathed against his lips. I need." I know," he murmured against her lips. I've got you. He guided her backward until her legs hit the bed, then lowered her gently onto the mattress. She looked up at him with trust and desire, and something that might have been love already blooming in her eyes. "Are you sure?" Marco asked one more time. "I'm more sure of anything," Kira whispered, and pulled him down to her. They took their time, Marco worshipping every inch of luminescent skin he uncovered, Kira gasping and glowing brighter with each touch. Her fingers traced the muscles of his back, learning the shape of him. And when they finally came together, slow and careful and achingly tender, Kira's skin exploded into brilliant rose gold light that filled the entire room. "I love you," she gasped against his shoulder. "Is that crazy? I love you." "Not crazy," Marco groaned, holding her closer. "Not when I love you too." They moved together like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. And when Kira finally shattered in his arms, crying out his name, her skin cycled through every color of the sunset before settling into the softest, warmest pink Marco had ever seen. Afterward, she curled against his chest, both of them breathless and glowing, her literally, him metaphorically, and Marco couldn't stop running his fingers through her hair. "The bond is complete," Kira murmured sleepily. "You're mine now, and I'm yours." "Good," Marco said, kissing her forehead, "because I'm not letting you go. Even when the syndicate comes looking? Especially when the syndicate comes looking." Kira smiled against his skin and fell asleep, still glowing, safe in the arms of the man who opened the wrong door and gave her back her life.
A new harbor. Marco woke to the sound of the station's morning cycle chime and the sensation of cool, soft skin pressed against his chest. For a moment, he thought he'd dreamed it all. The airlock, the girl, the night that had changed everything. Then Kira stirred against him, making a sleepy sound, and her skin shifted from pale dawn blue to warmer lavender as she woke. "Morning," she mumbled into his shoulder. "Morning," Marco replied, unable to stop smiling. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in 4 years," Kira said honestly. She propped herself up on one elbow, dark hair falling around her face, and looked at him with those incredible eyes. "You're real. This is real. I didn't imagine it." "Very real," Marco confirmed, reaching up to tuck her hair back. "And you're staying." It wasn't a question, but Kira answered anyway. "I'm staying, if you'll have me." "Kira, I punched the wrong airlock code and found you. I'm pretty sure the universe was trying to tell me something." Marco sat up, bringing her with him, keeping her wrapped in his arms. "But we need to be smart about this. The syndicate—" They laughed. "I've been monitoring station docking logs since we got here." She gestured to Marco's work pad, which was pulled up with the station manifest. "Their ship departed at 0400. They must have decided I wasn't on this level." Marco felt tension he didn't know he'd been carrying drain out of his shoulders. "They could come back." "Then we'll deal with it," Kira said firmly. "Together." They spent the morning figuring out logistics. Marco called in sick to a shift, the first time in 3 years, and helped Kira set up a temporary identity in the station registry. She couldn't use her real name, not yet, so they chose something simple. Kira Reeves. "Taking your last name already?" Marco teased, though his heart did something complicated in his chest at seeing it on the screen. Kira looked at him seriously. "We're bonded. In Thalassian culture, that means family. Is it different for humans?" "No," Marco said softly. "No, it's not different at all." The station housing authority was surprisingly accommodating when Marco explained he needed to add a dependent to his residential assignment. The clerk barely looked up from her screen as she processed the paperwork. "Quarters will be reassigned to a larger unit by end of week. Next." Just like that, Kira had a home. They spent the day exploring that fact. Marco showed Kira the observation deck where she pressed her face to the viewport and stared at Neptune's swirling blue storms with wonder. He took her to the station commissary where she tried 17 different kinds of fruit and declared that Earth's strawberries were a religious experience. He introduced her to coffee, which she hated, and hot chocolate, which she loved so much she drank 3 cups. And everywhere they went, she held his hand like a lifeline. "People are staring," Kira whispered as they walked through the main concourse that evening. "Let them stare," Marco said. "You're gorgeous in your mind. They can look all they want. They can't touch. Kira's skin flushed that pretty pink again. Possessive human. You have no idea, Marco murmured and pulled her into a quiet corner to kiss her until she was glowing. By the time they returned to their quarters, Kira's skin had settled into a constant warm rose color that Marco was starting to recognize as happiness. She immediately went to the tiny window and stared out at the stars, her expression distant and thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" Marco asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her. Kira leaned back against him with a sigh. "My sister, my mother. I left them behind when I ran. I don't even know if they're okay." Marco's arms tightened around her. "We'll find out, I promise. When it's safe, we'll find a way to get messages to them, to let them know you're alive and free." "Free?" Kira repeated wonderingly. "I'm really free, aren't I? No more facility? No more guards? No more being told who I belong to?" "You belong to yourself," Marco said firmly. "Always. The bonding thing, that's a choice we both made. You can unmake it anytime you want." Kira turned to his arms, looking up at him with fierce intensity. "I don't want to unmake it ever. Do you understand? You gave me back my life, Marco. You gave me choice. You gave me love. Real love. The kind I thought only existed in stories." Marco cupped her face in both hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. Her skin shimmered like opals beneath the wetness. "You did the same thing for me," he said quietly. "I was just going through the motions before you, working, sleeping, existing, but not really living. And then you stumbled out of that cargo bay, and everything changed." "I didn't stumble," Kira protested. "I emerged dramatically." "You were terrified and naked." "Dramatically terrified and naked." Marco laughed and kissed her, tasting salt and joy. "I love you," he said against her lips, "my beautiful, dramatic, glowing alien girl." "I love you too," Kira whispered back, "my wrong airlock opening, protective, perfect human." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, watching Neptune turn slowly beyond the window. "Marco?" Kira said eventually. "Yeah? What happens now? Like with us, with everything?" Marco considered. "Well, I go back to work tomorrow. You can stay here or you can explore the station. There's a hydroponics bay on level 7 that I think you'd love. We figure out how to contact your family safely. We eat terrible station food and watch old Earth movies and just live. Together." "Together?" Kira repeated, like the word was sacred. "Together," Marco confirmed, "for as long as you want." "Forever, then. I want forever." Marco's heart squeezed so hard it almost hurt. Then forever it is. 3 months later, Marco came home from his shift to find Kira waiting for him in the doorway of their new quarters, twice the size of his old room, with actual space for the plants that she'd started growing on every available surface. She was wearing one of his shirts and nothing else, skin glowing soft gold, and she had the biggest smile on her face. "Guess what?" she said. "What?" "I got accepted," Kira breathed. "The xenobotany program at the university on Titan, full scholarship. They said my proposal on cross-species pollination was revolutionary." Marco picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "That's incredible! I'm so proud of you." "We'd have to move," Kira said, suddenly nervous. "To Titan. Would you be okay with that? Leaving Horizon Gateway?" Marco set her down and kissed her soundly. "Kira, you're my home. Wherever you go, I go. Always." Tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving trails of shimmering blue on her golden skin. "I don't deserve you." "You deserve everything," Marco said fiercely, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." 5 years later,
Dr. Kira Sullivan-Reeves stood in front of a lecture hall full of students, her skin cycling through excited shades of purple and blue as she talked about hybrid garden ecosystems. Her husband sat on the back row, still wearing his maintenance uniform from his new job at the Titan agricultural domes, watching her with the same odd expression he'd worn that first night in the airlock. And when she finished, and the students filed out, and Kira ran into his arms, skin glowing brilliant rose pink, Marco thought about wrong turns and right places, and how sometimes the best things in life happen when you punch in the wrong code. "Ready to go home?" Kira asked, kissing him. "With you?" Marco said. "Always." They left the university hand in hand, skin and soul bound together by a choice they'd made in a locked airlock 5 years ago, a choice they've kept making every single day since then. The wrong door had led to exactly the right place, and neither of them would change a single thing. The end.